We're back in to recorded session and broadcast. We've had a discussion about some confidential matters which relate to 4.2, and there's been no decisions made. So we're back to discussing the recommendation, which is on page 5 of the council papers, and the recommendation is there. Do I have a mover of that recommendation? I'll move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Jim Sanderson. Sorry, Jim, my screen doesn't carry everybody. Ross, when you point down, I see a different councillor. So seconder councillor, I think that I'll speak to it. We've charged the staff with negotiating a deal. We're working on a large tender for this council. I'm sure we'll be able to reach an agreement with the tenderers, and so I'm all for the recommendation which is there. Is anybody wishing to speak against the recommendation? Councillors, I'd like to put the recommendation. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Against? Everybody's in favour. Councillor Collins is against. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on. Uh, 4.3, summary of council investments. Recommendations there on 14. Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor McLaughlin, anything you'd like to say? Councillors, any comments on this matter? Councillor Collins, go ahead.
I think there might be an issue with the table. If we look at the summary of council investments, up the top we've got the CBA term deposit, which is also the same rate as the at call. So I think it all needs to move down because the total doesn't add up to 22. So that leads into my next question. If we've got a term deposit here, or the second last one, is that $6 million in a term deposit, or is that the at call amount?
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Finance. Just need to unmute.
That would be $6 million at a term deposit, unless there's some problem with the table that you've mentioned before. That's the way it's shown there.
And the rate we've got is at 0.01%. Yeah,
I doubt that. That must be some mistake there with that. I'll check that.
Yeah, I think they're all misaligned, but it comes to the question, if that's the amount, at the last report we've got, we had $5.5 million at call, which seems like a lot to have on hand. So I'm thinking that $6 million is at call at 0.01%. And I'm just wondering why we're keeping such high cash balances at call when they should. Look, I know we're getting, bugger all interest rates, but it shouldn't be 0.01%.
I'll check the table and get an email to councillors on that.
Maybe can we bring back at the next report just something about, or whether it's a briefing about how much cash we actually have to keep on hand, because these term deposits can be broken if necessary, but it's a significant amount of cash.
Yeah, I take your point. We do try and optimise it so that we match our commitments as they come up.
Yeah.
So as much as possible, we try to put it on that term deposit for a better interest rate. But as you know, you've got to keep some money on call for that quicker access.
Yeah.
Could I check? Is there any problem with bringing this investment report back to the next meeting? Do we need to pass it tonight? Let's get the numbers right.
Yeah, we could bring it back next meeting. Yeah.
Could I suggest we do that? Could I move that we do that, councillors? Any councillor Miles?
One question, just one follow-up on that. I think we were discussing with the restrictions about rather than comparing it to the former year end, to actually compare it to the last report so that we can see the movements rather than the movements over a year, the movements since the last meeting.
Yeah,
So
I
that would tell us more.
agree. It would be very helpful. All right, councillors, we'll defer this to the next meeting, bring it back with the corrections. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Collins, for that. 4.4 is low-rise housing density code. Recommendation, it's a receive and note, page 17. Councillor Miles, seconded. I'll second it. Councillor Miles. One moment. Go ahead.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, obviously this has been a long process. The state government deferred this for councils to investigate further whether they need to tighten up their LEP DCP. It was further extended for another year. Came into play on 1 July, I believe. It seems sensible. It's a good report that council's done up, outlining the actual affected areas on the map of our LGA. But I think it's time, given that there's been a major deferment and there was obviously the opportunity given to councils to tidy up any issues with their LEP and DCP, that we get on and adopt this.
Thank you, councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against the recommendation? Can I put the recommendation?
No. Whoa.
Councillor,
Mr. Mayor.
against?
No, I'd like to move an amendment.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
That receive and note is part one of the motion. Part two is that council finalise its planning proposal and submit it as indicated by the minister in his letter. And part three is that council revisit the LSPSs to ensure that we have the character of our localities clearly defined to ensure that there is appropriate development.
Mr. Mayor, if it assists, I'm happy to include those in my motion.
Yeah, I think we may have even agreed that in the past at some stage. Could we just bring up the recommendation, please, on the screen when you're ready? Make sure we've got it right. Your suggestion, Councillor Williams, are you happy with that?
Yep, and council revisit the LSPS to ensure we have the character of the localities clearly defined to ensure appropriate development.
Councillor Miles? Councillor Miles has accepted that. I was the seconder, I think, so I'll accept it too. Any further discussion required, councillors? Can't see everybody on the screen again. Yeah, Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I don't share the view that this is a good outcome for Hunters Hill. I think it's a bit of a disgrace, to be honest. We've seen the conflict which the complying development process has caused in important parts of Hunters Hill over the last several years, where totally inappropriate development is allowed to take place without the normal requirements which Hunters Hill would expect through its LEP and DCP. This complying development cancer is one that overrides what is the acceptable development within our municipality. And we've seen some horrendous developments take place, and we've seen conflict and heartache within our community as a result of it. It's also cost council quite a bit in terms of trying to assist in rectifying what basically turn out to be incompatible development with the neighbourhood and the surroundings. So that's why we need to sit down and make sure our LEPSs now adequately reflect our position, because when they were developed, this proposal was not confirmed upon us. Now, this is another escalation of the problem. We now have medium density. They've taken medium density out of it. in terms of the title, but that's basically what you're going to get under the same rules which you get now with complying development for residential housing. Residents will have minimal say, will actually have no say, and it'll be done on a checklist basis, and the poor residents will be left in the dark and left unrepresented in the process, unable to voice their concerns. I think it's a disgrace, to be honest, and I think it's an imposition on a significant part of our municipality. I see our municipality as a whole. I don't distinguish between different groups within our, and it's going to devastate, as the current complying development process, or it's going to escalate the decline of a very important part of Hunters Hill municipality, which is Boronia Park, parts of Gladesville, and also parts of Hunters Hill itself. I just fear for what we're going to end up with, and it's going to end up as pretty much a treeless, overdeveloped, fence-to-fence jungle, which quite often you see in some of the new developing areas in Western Sydney, where you have minimal yard, no landscaping, no privacy, overshadowing is just gone out the window. So I don't support the outcome or the draconian position which the government has taken on this. But if it's there, it's legislated, we can't change that, but we can help our community and help our residents make sure that we give every effort to have their voice heard, to make sure that we tidy up our documentation and build in our expectations wherever possible into the process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I share your concerns. Anybody wishing to speak for Councillor Collins?
It's actually more just a question, if I may.
Yes.
Wrong time. Just in the conclusion, so I'm just looking through the recommendation is to receive a note. But there's mention of yeah, actually no, that's fine. If it's just receive a note, what was the amendment to the?
Could we bring up the current motion or recommendation, please? It's on the screen now.
Okay. And the planning proposal relates to, what does the planning proposal relate to?
Councillor Williams, would you like to just speak to that briefly?
I would have thought it's more appropriate for the planning staff, but the planning proposal was, and as indicated in the minister's letter, still being invited from Hunters Hill, and the planning proposal was about including the whole of the municipality within a conservation area that would exclude, the intent is to exclude and protect those areas that are currently under threat by this new requirement. And the minister is indicating that he's still open to it.
Thank you, Councillor, for your assistance. Councillor Collins, does that answer your question?
So that planning proposal, because I hope that we're not here adopting to encapsulate all of Hunters Hill in a heritage conservation area. Is this what this motion is suggesting? We're actually going to make good on that?
Mr. Mayor, that's a motion that was agreed to by council a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Okay, councillors, it's moving on. Do we need further discussion on
We
this?
do. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sanderson,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
you wish to speak for or against?
I wish to speak for, and in particular for the amendment suggested by Councillor Williams. You'll see at the end of the report on page 20, it does refer to part 3 of a motion I brought to council a couple of years back. And Councillor Williams has just touched on it, the notion of making the entire municipality a heritage conservation area to protect us from the perils of complying development. even if we were not successful in that outcome, it's still important that we amend the LEP so that our heritage and the character and all those things about our municipality are recognised, and we have the opportunity to build on that to justify expanding the heritage conservation areas. When we look at some of the environmental damage that has been done by complying development in recent times, you don't need to go no further than High Street, Blaxland Street, Milling Street, you'd name many more. There is massive justification for Milling Street in particular, Blaxland Street, I would think, as a minimum, to become part of the heritage conservation area. So I guess we go through the process. We don't need to rejig that or repass that motion of some time ago again. But we need to put things in place so the LSPS process can lead us to that outcome in the long run. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Anybody wishing to speak against? For? Councillor Collins, you wishing to speak against?
Yeah, look, I just don't think that that encapsulating all of Hunters Hill, 80% is in a conservation area. I think that to try and put the entirety of Hunters Hill in a conservation area is probably a knee-jerk overreaction to what's going on here. I absolutely agree that there's issues with this complying development system. There are improvements that have taken place. There's a long way to go, but I don't think that the answer is to. I think we should try and work within the rules we've been given, and try and make this work, rather than just all of a sudden put the whole of Hunters Hill into a conservation zone. I don't think that would be what the majority of well, it's really this area here. I'm not sure that's what they would all want. So I think that I would like to see more consultation from the community before we put in a proposal to encapsulate the conservation zone. So I don't support that.
Thank you. Could you bring, if you wish to speak for Councillor McLaughlin? Could we unmute Councillor McLaughlin? Do you wish to speak for?
Well, I will be supporting it anyway, and with the amendments. But just to follow on from Councillor Collins's comment, I'm assuming that when we put any planning proposal together that would encapsulate making the whole of Hunters Hill a conservation area, there would be consultation with the community on that proposal.
General Manager?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, could the Director of Planning add to that?
Hello, through you, Mayor.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Part of the process, you're correct, is the consultation process of any amendment to a planning proposal.
Thank you.
And what, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify what conservation area or zoning of that whole area would mean, it means that it now comes back under the Hunters Hill LEP and planning DCP. It doesn't put any further onus on the residents, but allows our planning instruments to look over them and help them through the process.
Okay, back to Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor McLaughlin, did you have anything else you wanted to add after that? No? Councillor Collins, do you have a question, Councillor Collins? Question?
Question.
Go ahead.
Considering that the original recommendation didn't actually encapsulate the all of Hunters Hill in a conservation zone. The financial impact assessment in this report is that there's no direct financial impact. Now, I would imagine if we were going to put together a planning proposal and capture,
Councillor Collins, do you have a question?
yes, would you let me get to it, Mr. Mayor? I
I'll
would
give you an
like to ask the
opportunity.
question.
I'll give you an opportunity, but this is not a debate. This is a question.
Well, if you let me get to the question, I'll ask it. I would have asked it by now. To the general manager, through you, Mr. Mayor, what would be the cost of this? And where's the budget coming from?
Yeah, need to bring a report back.
Okay. Any
Further question?
question?
Yes. How can we pass a resolution to prepare a planning proposal? It's going to cost a significant amount of money if we haven't allocated the budget for it. That's not even, we can't even do that.
I think you're right.
Mr. Mayor,
Hold on a minute.
no, look,
Hold on.
Councillor Collins is throwing a furphy in here. We've already approved we've already approved a plan.
Councillor Williams, you don't have the floor. Hold on a moment. Hold on a moment. It's a question back.
You let Councillor Collins constantly interrupt.
Councillor Williams, you do not have the floor. It's a question about how do we fund this, and I'm putting that back to the General Manager, and I'll come back to you immediately afterwards, Councillor Williams. General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would need to bring a report back to the next council meeting.
So that should answer your question, Councillor Collins?
Yeah, but I don't believe we can technically pass this motion as it stands.
Unless we know where the funding's coming from.
Yes.
Okay, and that's correct. So Councillor Williams, you're next.
Mr. Mayor, we already have a motion to prepare this process. The motion says finalise. So we're moving to finalise an already agreed position of council. And I'm quite happy for the General Manager to come back and say how she's going to fund it. But we already have on the books a motion to do this. The word of the motion, the amendment, is to finalise, and which is what the Minister is suggesting we do. So we're not asking for something new. We're asking something to be finalised. And if the General Manager wants to come back with a budget or a process as to how we do that, then that's fine. But I think the council already has it on its books to do this.
Okay, Councillor McLaughlin, you had something you wanted to say. Councillor McLaughlin next, and then Councillor Collins, a question from you after that. Councillor McLaughlin.
So that was my point I was going to make, and Councillor Williams just made it, is that this is an existing resolution of council, and this is just putting that back into train. I'm assuming it's already in train and it's already partly or fully funded because it is a resolution of council, but this is just reiterating what is already on the books.
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I ask the Director of Planning to comment on that.
Through you, Mayor. The amendment the review of the LSPS is part of the standard procedures that we are following through now to amend future development control plan and the future LEP amendment. That's part of the process, and this will form part of the process as well through the amendments following through the LSPS actions coming from the program.
Thank you. Councillor Collins, another question?
Yes. Just regarding this motion already been on the books, I went through the 2021 budget pretty carefully, and I couldn't find any provision for this planning proposal in there. So whilst we have a motion that we want to do it, my understanding, if it's not in the 2021 budget and it hasn't been provided for, then we can't pass this motion as it is.
Okay, I'll put that question to the General Manager. General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, back to the Director of Planning. Can you please explain the process and the funding for that?
There's currently funding in current budget to review the actions and action the LSPS outcomes. There is also part of that is the review of the development control plan, and also the character statements are part of that review, and any amendments to the LEP, which will constitute a amendment to the LEP through a planning proposal is part of that budget, current budget as well.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, you're next. Go ahead.
Through you, I'm guessing to the General Manager, not expecting you to be able to answer this tonight, but my recollection was not that we put the heritage conservation area over the entire municipality. Could you clarify that by the next meeting? Because I don't recall that being the, and obviously I'm not supportive of a motion of that nature going to a formal planning proposal, because it would be prohibitively expensive in my view. But my understanding of that motion was not that we were seeking to get a heritage conservation area for all of Hunters Hill. That's been tried and tested and failed several times.
General Manager.
Through Mr. Mayor, have to bring back a report that provides the background and how a planning proposal in line with what the Minister's letter has said could be progressed and the funding for that.
Okay, now could I ask we bring up the motion again, please? Councillor Miles, are you still in agreement with the words which we have there?
I am, Mr. Mayor, but I mean, the clarity, I suppose, the devil will be in the detail with the second point. My recollection and understanding is not Councillor Williams's, but it's not, but as it's not reflected in the motion specifically, I have no problem with it going to council.
All right, thank you.
We may debate what that planning proposal looks like, and certainly if that's the view, then I'll be arguing against it being lodged in that way.
All right, so you're happy with that. I'm happy with what's in that amendment. I'd like to put the amendment, councillors. I'll put the amended motion, which becomes the motion. Write a reply if you need it, Councillor Miles, seeing the amendment is now the motion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, against? Anybody against? Councillor Collins against. Thank you, councillors. Now, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break, considering it's now 8:15, so we'll be back. Anybody viewing, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. 20 past.